I'm joined here by 15-year NFL pro Chad Brown, and obviously this week the Eagles are playing the Seahawks. Chad, you played for Seattle for 8 seasons, so you know what it's like up there in the Pacific Northwest, so we thank you for joining us, man. How you doing?
I'm fantastic, man. Looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So let's talk about Seattle first. I know you're in Denver, you're in Colorado right now, so I'm sure you're still paying attention to your Seahawks. A little bit of an odd year for Seattle, but we're here in Philly, so we're trying to get like a vibe on what to expect when the Eagles play there this Monday night. So what you see right now, your thoughts on Seattle. I know no Geno Smith last week. They had to use their backup quarterback, but knowing what you know about this team, what should we expect to see from them on Monday night?
Well, for a team that's lost, 4 in a row now, 5 of their last 6 of their last 9, Seattle's struggling. Pete Carroll, I think, prides himself on being a very positive guy, but this stretch of games has I begin to break Pete Carroll and some of his positivity. He's actually called out a few guys personally in press conferences, very un-Pete Carroll-like thing. So I think the frustration is not just in the locker room, it's also upstairs in that coaching room as well. The fans are going to be incredibly supportive. The Eagles are going to come into a stadium that's going to be incredibly loud. So all that will be in place. That's what Seattle does. But on the field, whether it's Geno Smith or Drew Lock, that Seattle offense is not operating at a very high level. They're not running the ball very well. And Pete Carroll, despite being a defensive guy by nature, that defense is also not playing very well either.
Yeah, and that's sort of a rarity, especially under Pete Carroll. It seems like everything's been clicking for so long with him. You saw DK Metcalf upset last week. Things just not really going well. But you are someone who played there for a long time, so you know what the atmosphere is like. For those that haven't been there, I've never actually been to that stadium. What is it like to be in there on a game day?
Well, I think Kansas City may be the loudest stadium in the league, but I would say it's the Seahawks field level. On the field as a player, that is the loudest field in the NFL. That stadium was designed by Paul Allen, former owner, rest in peace. And he got together with some acoustic architects to really have that stadium built to reflect all the sound down onto field level. And it is almost impossible to communicate there. So any opposing team who's headed up to Seattle to play there on that field, they've got to do all they can in practice with loudspeakers and working signals during practice and all those kinds of things to give themselves a shot. I mean, the field is so loud, it's usually good for at least 1 or 2 false starts from the opponent's offense. So the Eagles certainly have to prepare for that and be able to go with silent counts and things like that so they don't find themselves overwhelmed by the pure volume down there on the field.
And I'm glad you brought that up, and that's why I brought up the whole stadium thing, because the Eagles struggled early in the game against Dallas with a couple of penalties on that first drive, and it really kind of killed their momentum to start that game. And so as you said, like I would expect to see the crowd there in Seattle sort of play a role there. But if Seattle is to upset, because they're a 4-point underdog right now at home against the Eagles, if they are to upset the Eagles, what would you expect to happen on their side?
Well, the Seattle's going to have to find a way to, control the ball and run the ball, which they haven't done very well all year. So whether it's Drew Lock or Geno Smith is still listed as questionable as of today. We'll see what's going to happen as the week goes along. But both those guys are going to be benefited by a run game that's going to have to be better than what they've been. The Seattle offensive line, not necessarily great, going against a pretty talented front for the Philadelphia Eagles. So their ability to run the ball and at least give the Eagles defense, which also is not necessarily performing so great, but at least give them a bit of pause on their way back to the quarterback. If a defense doesn't have to respect your run game, they can pin their ears back and just literally go after your quarterback. Almost every defense in the NFL is going to look good in that circumstance. So it's going to be up to Pete Carroll and his offensive staff to come up with a game plan that allows that run game, while it may not be eye-popping numbers, to find a level of success where they can sustain just trying to run the ball and force that Eagles defense, to be honest. That would probably be step one towards a Seahawk victory.
I don't know how much you've been paying attention to what's happening here in Philly, but clearly things have changed over the last 2 weeks for the Eagles. First part of the season, they start 8-0. things are looking like it would be a repeat of last year and when they went to the Super Bowl. But now it's just not working the way it had, and they seem to have been maybe exposed a little bit by the 49ers and Cowboys, two teams that are obviously vying with the Eagles for the top spot in the NFC. When you look at those two games, what stands out to you about the Eagles in those two as compared to, the first 12 weeks of the season when everything was clicking like that?
Well, you look at the first 12 weeks of the season, people were talking about Jalen Hurts being an MVP candidate. That conversation seems to have died. People were talking about A.J. Brown being the best receiver in all of football. That conversation has died. And this Eagles offense, based on the 49ers and the Cowboys game, it seems like the only consistent play that meets any kind of level of success on a sustained basis offensively is a quarterback draw with Jalen Hurts. And this ain't high school. You can do that kind of thing in high school. You can't do that on the NFL level. So they've got to find a way to get into some kind of rhythm. They need their best playmakers, guys like A.J. Brown, to step up and be consistent. The drops against the Cowboys were very difficult to watch for a player of his caliber. So I've been on a team where things start to spiral out of control. Now, these are two very quality opponents, the 49ers and the Cowboys. This is an opportunity going against the Seahawks team that I've already talked about is struggling. Lost their last 4, 5 of the last 6 of their last 9. This is an opportunity to get right because the Eagles are certainly talented. And I not only expect them to be a playoff team, but a team that makes a deep playoff run. So for them to get back on track, this is the time to get going. You don't want to stumble into the playoffs. You don't want to back your way into the playoffs. You want to go into the playoffs playing your best football. Here's an opportunity against a team that's clearly struggling. It gives the Eagles a great chance to get right.
You played for a long time, and you played for a lot of teams that had some serious, Super Bowl aspirations. In a scenario like this, where you've got a team that's coming off a Super Bowl run that plays so well in the beginning of the year and then stumbles the way that they have, is that sort of like a make or break kind of spot that the Eagles are in? I mean, it certainly can be demoralizing, or I guess it can be a rallying cry, if you will. Is that sort of like, is it a coin flip here where the Eagles go from this point forward?
I think it really is. And it's going to test the mental toughness of this football team. When you lose a Super Bowl, there's always a tendency as a Super Bowl loser to literally want to fast forward your way through the season and get back to the Super Bowl again to prove everybody that you are the better team and we just made a couple of mistakes and we can get this done. So in that attempt to mentally fast forward, sometimes you lose the thread of what you need to accomplish. You have to earn your way back in there. No one's just going to lay down in front of you. I think the Eagles were able to take some of that momentum last year and carry it into this season. But now's that time of year where they're on a bit of a precipice. Do they slide back down and succumb to what they've succumbed to the last 2 weeks, or they find a way, to your point, to use that as a rallying cry and get things back in order as they head into the playoffs?
Just froze there for a quick second, but we got you back. Defensively speaking, that is, that's where you made your money in the league. Right now with the Eagles' defensive front four, they're built to win there, but they're not winning. And that seems to be a huge issue with this team, is that they've got some extremely talented people along that front that aren't getting the job done. And teams like the 49ers and the Cowboys are exposing the fact that if you can give the quarterback a little bit of time, if you can get rid of the ball quickly and neutralize that defensive line, then you can win. But since the Eagles are built there and built to win there, is there really any other way to do it defensively? They sort of seem stuck in that, hey, if we don't win this way, then we may not be a great defense on a game-to-game basis. Is that what you see?
I see teams having a bit of an answer to what the Eagles want to do. Now, the challenge then is to the Eagles coaching staff is to dig it into another layer in the playbook, peel back another layer of the onion. We can get some things done a different way. And so if your formula is literally, we need our front to dominate in the run game, we need our front to put pressure on their quarterback, otherwise we have no answers as far as coverage. Once you get into the playoffs, those are good teams that make the playoffs. Those are teams who have answers. Those are teams who are going to be able to handle your strength and exploit you at your weakness. So again, to go back to what we were just talking about, here's one of those precipice points, not just from a mentality within the locker room of how do we handle these last two defeats and move forward, but also how do we find ways to address our shortcomings and still find a way to move forward and play our best football during this stretch run and go into the playoffs with some momentum.
How hard is that to do? For an entire unit where you're built one way, it's not working. You get to a point in the season like this, they're not going to completely change everything they do, but when you're just so used to kind of doing it one way, is it difficult to switch things up as a defensive coordinator? I guess, Sean Desai has done, I would think, a pretty decent job so far this year. But when you get to a point like this and you have to tweak things, I guess that's where defensive coordinators are supposed to make their money, is it not?
Exactly, and that's exactly, you took the words out of my mouth. This is where he needs to earn his money. This is why you show up at the facility at 5 o'clock in the morning and you don't leave until midnight, because you're trying to come up with some schemes that will keep your positives your positive, but somehow minimize your weaknesses. So whether it's constantly changing up coverages, going from man to zone, showing all different types of zone looks to confuse quarterbacks, whether it's now incorporating maybe a few more secondary blitzes or bringing the linebackers into the blitz game, showing some different things that way, they've got to come up with some things that offenses aren't prepared for. Once teams in the NFL get the book on you, then that's what you're going to see every week until you fix it. Opposing coaches aren't dumb. If you can't handle this, well, then we're going to give you all that you can handle of that and even more. So it's really going to be up to Sean Desai and that entire defensive staff to come up with some ways to present the Seahawks and the last three opponents with some varied looks, things they haven't seen before, to throw them off. If you just keep rolling out the same thing of our front's going to win the game for us, well, you're going to be sadly mistaken. Teams are going to go all block. They're going to keep backs and tight ends in. They're going to do all those kind of things that teams do to minimize a dynamic front and exploit a weaker secondary.
Definitely a chess match from here on out for the Eagles, and it's really been vanilla, I guess you could say, really on both sides of the ball too, offensively and defensively. And I think that comes back to Nick Sirianni. He's the head coach. He's the CEO coach now because he's not calling plays like he did when he first started here. And, I want to talk about head coaches because you played for some Hall of Fame level head coaches, Bill Cowher, Mike Holmgren. You played for Belichick for a couple of years as well. And Nick Sirianni obviously has started really fast. I think he's 26-7 over his last 33 games. And the numbers are eye-popping. But to continue that, to keep progressing and get to that next level, what stands out to you about what the greats did to stay at that level?
I think you always have to consistently evolve. If you think about some of these Super Bowl championships that Bill Belichick has won, the first time Bill and Tom Brady won a Super Bowl championship, that offense was based on the ground, and it was Corey Dillon. Then it was more sort of a third down passing thing with Troy Brown. But then later on, they had success with two tight ends, with Aaron Hernandez and Gronk. Then it became Wes Welker and Randy Moss and the highest scoring offense ever. That team didn't win a Super Bowl championship, but it shows the constant evolution of the schemes based on the personnel and what other teams are doing. When you think about the Bill Cowher Pittsburgh Steelers, certainly we were Blitzburgh on defense. We got after your quarterback, but as much as we were ground-based, in the Super Bowl we went to and played against the Cowboys in '95, our stretch run of the regular season and throughout the playoffs, we certainly ran the ball, but then we counted up and went with 5 wide receivers. So the ability to, again, evolve, take a look at your personnel. How can we find the mismatches? How can we exploit where this other team is weak? How can we do things schematically to cover up for our weaknesses? That's where these coaches earn their money. When you've got a great team and everything's clicking, it seems so easy until it's not. It's actually really hard to win games in the NFL. And it's very difficult to win games consistently, but it takes a constant evolution and tweaking of things in order to maintain that razor's edge of sharpness. And now the Philadelphia Eagles find themselves at a point where they are no longer on that edge of sharpness, and they are at a point in their season where they have to evolve and change and adapt. Otherwise, they're going to meet the same results they've had the last 2 weeks.
It's a great way to put it. And right now that falls on the head coach, Nick Sirianni. We'll see what he's maybe got up his sleeve. As someone who played in the league for 15 years, and obviously you've been an analyst at a very high level now for a long time too. The officiating seems to get, from my perspective, worse every year, and a lot of people's perspective. Like, we can sit back on the couch and say they keep blowing these calls and missing these calls, but as someone who's been in it and as someone who watches it the way you do, is that truly the case, or have we sort of just been, I don't know, is the way we watch the game, has it morphed over time because we've got instant replay and we've got all these different camera angles now? They seem to have a really hard job, but they also seem to be struggling right now as officiating goes.
Well, as I got older as a player, I got to know the officials. And then I'm a part of the former Players Association, the Retired Players Association, which has a lot of officials in it because all of the guys played ball in the league. So I've had a chance to get to know them. And let me say, they're all very hardworking, dedicated, diligent guys. They're not looking to go out and blow calls. But the speed of the game is insane. If anybody who's ever had a chance to be on the sideline, even for an NFL preseason game, the size, the speed of the game, it's almost impossible. So to sit at home on your couch, very cozily, make a call based on 7 different cameras showing you the replay in slow motion at the very perfect moment, it does give us a false sense of maybe superiority as a football fan, as a football viewing public, versus that official who's got to do that in real time with only one look at it. I think the officials try incredibly hard, but I think the holes have been exposed. As we were talking about with the Eagles, the holes have been exposed. Now the holes have been exposed with the officiating crew. And I think the need for full-time officials, not guys who are judges and attorneys and all these other things that they are in their day jobs. I think the NFL is now, the NFL is trying to get to $25 billion a year in revenue. I think they're at $19 billion a year right now. For an organization that has that kind of dollars behind it, to be able to employ full-time officials doesn't seem like it's that big of a step or that far of a reach to ask guys to dedicate themselves fully to this job all year round and make themselves better. But at the same time, I think we recognize that the process is just flawed to begin with. Even if this guy is going to make mistakes because he only gets one look at it in live action, why does he then have to jog down to the other field, look at this little iPad on a stand, and then talk to us? Have somebody talk directly into his ear from New York who's got access to the same cameras angles that we're looking at and give us some quick information and let's move on. Because I think we are recognizing that humans are going to make mistakes in live action. But considering we have all the replays and we have all the camera angles and we can have, we can hire Dean Blandino back from Fox and bring him back to the NFL and have him make those instant calls in a booth in New York to quickly rectify something that we all can see at home is wrong. That's where the NFL is missing the boat. I think improving the officials certainly would help, but also improving the process and making it faster and quicker so we don't dwell on it so much would probably be the best way to go about that and attack that issue.
Yeah, we seem to be at a tipping point with officiating. And I hate to be that guy that complains from where I'm sitting, because I know they've got a super difficult job when you've got to deal with the incredible talent that's out there, the incredible speed, your A.J. Browns, your D.K. Metcalfs. Feels like every play, though, could be a flag, and they've got to pick and choose which ones they think are worthy of throwing the yellow out there. So, yeah, not an easy job. NFL really does have to sit down and look itself in the mirror and say, what do we want to be in the coming years when it comes to the officiating? So some great points there, Chad. I found this interesting. No, go ahead.
I was going to add one more thing there.
Yeah.
Okay, so even as experienced as a coach as Andy Reid is, he had the call go against he and Patrick Mahomes last week. Andy Reid said, this came out of his mouth. I was shocked to hear him say this. In a big game like this.
Yeah.
Wait. So the official is supposed to know at the moment that he's reaching into his pocket to throw the flag, wait a minute. This is a big game.
Right.
Is the official supposed to calculate what quarter of the game it's supposed to be? Is this official supposed to know this is possibly the game-winning drive, and therefore he's supposed to call it in the opening drive of the ball game? So even coaches who are going to be in the Hall of Fame, like Andy Reid, say ridiculous things regarding officiating. We can all disagree on the call and how that should have happened with the offsides against Kansas City, but when a coach says in a big game, you're putting something into the narrative that simply doesn't exist for the officiating crew.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because that obviously was the quote that kept, making its rounds here post Chiefs loss. I found that interesting. Yeah, I found that really interesting. Like, oh, okay, so he's supposed to say something to you. Maybe that's him just sticking up for his guy, right? Maybe Kadarius Toney's had issue after issue this year. Maybe he's just trying to stick up for his guy in a different way, and I understand that. But yeah, that was pretty ridiculous from someone who doesn't say a whole lot of ridiculous things. Andy Reid's usually pretty even keeled, and yeah, that to me kind of stood out. Before I let you go, because I kept you here for 20 minutes, which is longer than I thought I would. You are the owner of a reptile breeding and shipping company called Ship Your Reptiles. How does that happen? That seems so cool.
Okay, so I had a reptile breeding company called Pro Exotics Reptiles. I started that company when I was in the NFL. Once I retired from the NFL, I devoted myself full-time to that. Over the course of the time of that business, we bred 85 different species and subspecies of reptile, sold them all over the planet, produced several thousand baby reptiles every single year, was the pioneer of breeding certain species and make them popular within the pet trade. And towards the end of the life of that business, I started Ship Your Reptiles to help other reptile breeders and hobbyists be able to send their animals out to their customers. Well, along the way, I've grown the business from just helping other reptile breeders to the military mom who needs to send little Timmy's turtle from Tennessee to Texas when they get relocated with dad's next military assignment. So I help the Timmy's mom's not really a reptile person. She just loves her son and wants little Timmy's turtle to arrive safely. So I help her with all the packaging expertise and know-how on how to do that. And I also help the reptile business that's going to send out 50 geckos this week and another 50 geckos out next week. I've expanded the business beyond just reptiles. I have Ship Your Aquatics as well for people who are doing fish and koi and corals and aquatic plants. I have Ship Your Invertebrates for folks who are doing scorpions and spiders and tarantulas and all those kind of things. Wow. And I just recently launched Ship Your Flora as well for folks who need to ship their plants around. So basically all these living things that if you were to show up at a UPS or a FedEx ship center and say, here, I need to ship this to my friend, they would say, we don't do that. The reality is they do, but they do it through a service like mine where I provide all the expertise, the know-how, the heat packs, the cold packs, the specialized packaging so people can have very successful shipping processes to move their animals from one place to another.
That is fascinating. Did you grow up like a reptile lover? Like, did you have them in your room growing up?
My mother said no reptiles in her house. I did grow up in Southern California, so I had reptiles, snakes, and lizards and frogs in my backyard. Once I got to the University of Colorado, someone had a boa for sale in the dorms. I bought that boa. Then I bought another snake maybe later on that same year. Then I met a friend at a local pet store who actually we've become lifelong friends. He was in my wedding, and I was in his. And he was breeding reptiles in his spare bedroom. And I thought, as a scholarship athlete, I'm not allowed to have a job during the year per NCAA regulations, but they'll never know if I'm breeding reptiles and selling babies to all the kids on campus. So that's what I did for several years when I was at the University of Colorado. And then once I got into the NFL, I launched that business, Pro Exotics Reptiles.
And not that they would believe you anyway if you told them, hey, my job is breeding reptiles, right?
Right. And awesome. Selling them to all the students on campus. Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Really cool. That's amazing. Well, Chad, thank you so much. I kept you here a lot longer than I thought, so thank you so much. Appreciate it. Where can everyone see you around the world, around the country? I know you're in Colorado now doing a lot of stuff Broncos related.
Yeah, so you can always follow me on Twitter at ChadBrown94. College football season is over, but I just finished another season of being the lead college analyst for Compass Media Networks, a national radio outfit. And then I do all my Bronco stuff here locally in town. So chances are during football season, I'm talking to a microphone or a camera someplace doing just what we did right here.